How do you fly to LA without warning and find your own child barely holding on in intensive care? Why was her husband smiling on a ship like nothing was happening, while the hospital was calling me next of kin because nobody else was answering? What happens when the one person everyone calls just the wallet finally uses the rules they ignored? My name is Colin, and I am 56. I live in a quiet suburb outside Phoenix. I work with numbers for a living: budgets, payroll, contracts, risk. I am not loud. I do not enjoy conflict. People often mistake that for weakness. I learned long ago that calm is not the same as helpless. I have one child, my daughter Lena. She is 29. She moved to Los Angeles 2 years ago after she got married. I did not love the distance, but I told myself this was normal. Children grow up. They build their own lives. A parent learns to step back. In the months before all of this, I kept feeling something was off. It was never one big thing. It was small changes, like a slow shift in weather. Lena used to call me on Sundays, not every week, but often. Then it became texts, then it became short replies. When we did speak, she sounded tired in a way I could not explain. I asked if she was working too much. She said she was fine. She said life was busy. She said her husband Trent was handling things. Trent is 32. He is the kind of man who fills a room with his voice. He is friendly in public. He is quick with compliments. He can turn a simple story into a show. When Lena introduced us, he shook my hand hard and smiled like we were already friends. I tried to like him. I really did. I told myself that a loud young man is not always a bad man. Still, I noticed patterns. Trent would call me with ideas. He said it made sense for them to buy instead of rent. He said it made sense to upgrade the car because the commute was hard. He said it made sense for Lena to focus on her health for a while. Those calls always ended with some version of him asking if I could help. I helped more than I should have. I told myself I was supporting my child, not the marriage. I wired money for a deposit. I covered a few bills when they had timing issues. I paid for a medical visit when their insurance had a delay. I did it quietly. I did not announce it. I did not ask for thanks. Over time, Trent stopped even pretending. When he called, he spoke like I was part of his plan. He did not ask how I was. He did not ask about my job. He did not ask if I was tired of being the emergency tool they pulled out of the drawer. He just explained what he wanted and then waited. Lena never asked directly. That made it worse, in a way. When a child asks for help, you can talk about it. You can set limits. You can agree on a plan. But when the request comes through a spouse, it feels like a gate, like you do not even have full access to your own child anymore. I tried to visit in the fall. Lena said the timing was not good. Trent said they had trips planned and work events. He said I should not waste money on flights when they could call more instead. I remember staring at my phone after that. I thought, I am her father. Since when do I need permission? Then came the call. It was a Tuesday evening. I had just reheated leftovers and sat at my kitchen table. The house was quiet in that way it gets after a long day. My phone rang from a number I did not recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail because I get many unknown calls. But something in me said to answer. A woman introduced herself and said she was calling from a hospital in Los Angeles. Her tone was firm but careful, like she had done this many times. She asked if I was Colin and if I was related to Lena. I told her I was her father. She said Lena was in intensive care. She said they needed to confirm contacts and next steps. She asked if I was listed as the emergency contact. My throat went tight. I told her I did not know. I said Lena lived with her husband. I assumed he was on file. The woman paused. She said the husband was listed, yes. She said they had tried to reach him. She said they needed another family contact because they were not getting a response. I did not ask for details right away. I did not want to waste time with panic questions. I asked where the hospital was and what I needed to do. She told me the unit name and the address. She said I could come, but she also said there were rules about what they could share until certain things were confirmed. I thanked her. I ended the call. I stared at the wall for a second. I could feel my heart beating hard, but my hands were steady. I walked to my desk and opened my laptop. I pulled up flights to Los Angeles. Before I booked anything, I called Trent. It rang until voicemail. I tried again. Voicemail. I sent a text. I told him I got a call from the hospital. I told him I was flying in. I asked him to call me right away. No reply. I called Lena. Straight to voicemail. I stood in my kitchen with my phone in my hand, and I felt something cold settle in my chest. This was not the kind of moment where a person forgets to check their phone. This was not a casual missed call. This was a hospital calling family because the spouse was not answering. I booked the next flight I could get. I threw clothes into a small suitcase. I grabbed my charger, my laptop, and the folder where I keep important papers. It is an old habit. I do not like being far from my records. In the airport parking garage, I sat in my car for a minute with the engine off. I opened my messages again. Still nothing. I looked at the time. I thought about driving instead, but flying was faster. I needed speed. I needed to see her with my own eyes. At the gate, people were laughing and holding coffees. A couple argued softly about seats. A man in a suit typed on a laptop like he was in his own world. I watched all of it with a strange distance. My life had split into two parts: the world where everyone was normal, and my world where my daughter was in intensive care. On the plane, I forced myself to slow down and think. I opened a note on my phone and typed the facts as I knew them. Hospital name, unit name, time of call, the nurse's name, my attempts to contact Trent, my attempts to contact Lena. I kept it simple. I have learned that in stressful moments, details blur. Writing anchors the mind. I also thought back to the last message Lena sent me. It was 3 days before. I asked how she was feeling. She wrote that she was tired, but okay. She added a small heart emoji. I remember feeling relieved at the time. Now that message felt thin, like paper over a crack. When we landed, the airport lights felt too bright. The air smelled like fuel and fast food. I called Trent again while I walked through the terminal. Voicemail. I texted again, shorter this time. I told him I was at LAX. I told him to call. Outside, the pickup lanes were crowded. Cars rolled forward in slow waves. I got into a rideshare and gave the driver the hospital address. The driver tried to make small talk about traffic. I answered politely. My voice sounded normal, and that surprised me. Inside, I felt like I was moving through water. The hospital entrance was busy. People came in with flowers. People came out looking drained. I followed signs to the intensive care unit. At the desk, a woman asked for my name and who I was there for. I gave Lena's name and said I was her father. The woman's eyes softened for a moment. Then she asked for my ID. I handed it over. She asked if I was on the approved visitor list. I said I did not know. I explained the phone call. I explained that they could not reach the husband. She nodded like this matched what she already knew. She said they were being careful about privacy and decision roles. She said she could call the charge nurse to speak with me. I waited in a row of chairs. The room was quiet except for soft footsteps and the occasional beep from behind doors. I watched a man pace with his hands on his head. I watched an older woman stare at the floor like she was counting tiles. A nurse came out and introduced herself as Marisol, the charge nurse. She spoke in a calm voice, the kind that carries authority without being harsh. She asked me a few questions. She asked when I last spoke to Lena. She asked if I knew her medical history. She asked where her husband was. I told her the truth. I said Lena lived with her husband. I said I had been trying to reach him for hours. I said he was not answering calls or texts. I said I flew in as soon as the hospital called me. Marisol did not react in a dramatic way. She just nodded once, like she was marking a box in her mind. She said they had been trying to reach him as well. She said they needed a reliable contact because decisions and updates had to follow rules. She said she could share limited information until they confirmed the right path. I asked if I could see my daughter. Marisol said she would check what was allowed. She asked me to wait. I sat back down, staring at the closed door to the unit. My phone was in my hand. I refreshed my messages again and again, like that could change reality. Still nothing from Trent. No call, no text, no explanation. In that quiet waiting room, I finally let myself name what I had been avoiding for months. The imbalance was not just money, it was presence. It was duty, it was respect. My daughter was behind that door, and the man who promised to protect her could not even answer a hospital call. I kept my face calm, I kept my hands steady. But inside, something shifted from worry to clarity. Marisol returned and told me I could step to a hallway window for a moment, just to see Lena. She said I could not go into the room yet. She said she needed to keep things controlled. I followed her down the hall. We stopped near a glass window. I saw Lena lying still in a bed surrounded by equipment. Her face looked smaller than I remembered. Her hair was pulled back. There were lines and tubes arranged with careful tape. The room looked clean and cold. I did not cry. I did not collapse. I just stood there and breathed, one slow breath at a time. I told myself that panic would not help her. I told myself the only useful thing I could do was be present and act correctly. Marisol asked me to return to the waiting area while she updated the team that I was here. I walked back and sat down again. I looked at my phone one more time and pressed call on Trent's name. Voicemail. I lowered the phone, and I stared at the screen until it went dark. The next hour moved in slow pieces. I sat in that waiting room and watched doors open and close. Staff spoke in low voices. A cart rolled by. Someone's phone rang and they rushed outside to answer it. I kept looking at my own screen like it had become the only thing that mattered. I tried to focus on what I could control. I could be here. I could stay calm. I could ask the right questions. I could take notes. I could keep my head clear. But my mind kept drifting backward, trying to explain how we got to this point. When Lena first told me about Trent, she sounded bright. She said he was confident and fun. She said he had big plans. She said he made her feel safe. I remember thinking that safety can mean many things. Sometimes it means comfort. Sometimes it means excitement. Sometimes it means a person who talks like they know the future. I met him in person at a small restaurant near my home. He arrived late and acted like it was normal. He talked about his job, his workouts, his friends, his travel plans. He spoke fast, like he did not want silence to enter the room. When I asked him simple questions about his background, he gave answers that sounded good, but did not land on details. He kept the topic moving. I noticed that Lena watched him while he spoke, like she was checking his mood. At the end of the meal, he insisted on paying, but he did it with a performance. He waved his card like a sign. He told the server to keep the change. He looked at me and said he wanted to show he could take care of Lena. I thanked him and nodded. I did not argue. I told myself it was a first meeting. People try too hard. After that, he started calling me more than Lena did. He said he liked to keep the family close. He said he respected older men who built stable lives. He said he wanted my advice. At first, I believed it. I answered his calls. I gave him simple advice. I told him to build savings. I told him to avoid big loans if possible. I told him to plan for medical costs and emergencies. Because life always has surprises. He agreed with everything I said. Then he did the opposite. When they decided to move to Los Angeles, it happened fast. Lena said she had a chance for a better job. Trent said LA was where people made it. He said staying in our state was for people who were afraid. I asked basic questions. I asked what the rent would be. I asked what their plan was if one income dropped. I asked how their insurance worked. Trent laughed and said I worried too much. He said they were young and they would figure it out. They moved anyway. At first, Lena sent pictures. She showed me their new place. She showed me a view from a balcony. She tried to sound happy. I held on to that. Then the requests started. The first was small. Trent said their deposit was higher than expected. He said the landlord wanted extra. He said it was just timing. He said he would pay me back in 2 months. He said he did not want Lena to stress. I sent the money. I did not tell Lena right away. I did not want to create tension. I told myself I was helping them settle. 2 months passed. No repayment. No mention of it. When Trent called again, he spoke like that first transfer never happened. This time he said their car needed work. He said it was urgent. He said he could not have Lena stranded in LA traffic. He said he would handle it, but he needed a short-term help. I asked why he could not cover it with savings. He said he had moved money around for opportunities. He said I would not understand because I lived a careful life. He said he did not mean it in a bad way, just as a fact. That sentence stayed with me. He did not mean it in a bad way. It was his way of pushing. He could say a sharp thing, then wrap it in a calm tone like it was harmless. I helped again, but I asked for a clear plan. I said I needed them to treat this like real support, not like a surprise bill that appears in my lap. Trent said he agreed. He said he respected that. Then he joked that I was like a bank. I did not laugh. Lena smiled a little, but it looked forced. After that, I tried to change my approach. I started asking Lena directly how she was doing. I did not ask about money. I asked about her job, her sleep, her friends. Sometimes she answered. Sometimes she took a day or two. When she did answer, she used the same short lines. She said she was fine. She said she was tired. She said work was busy. She said she had a headache. She said Trent was taking care of things. I asked if she wanted me to visit. She said maybe later, when things calmed down. I asked if I could send groceries or help with small things. She said not to worry. The more she said not to worry, the more I worried. A few months ago, I finally got them on a video call together. Trent kept the camera close to his face like he owned the space. Lena sat off to the side. She looked thinner. Her skin looked pale under the lighting. I asked if she had been eating well. Trent answered for her. He said she was just stressed and he was managing it. He said I needed to stop treating her like a child. He said she was grown. I agreed that she was grown. I also said that grown people can still need care. I said I was not trying to control anything. I was trying to understand. Trent smiled and said I had a big heart, but he was the husband, so he would handle the hard parts. Then he changed the topic to a trip they were planning. He said Lena needed sunshine and fun. He said it was part of her recovery from stress. Recovery. That word hit me even then, but I did not push. I did not have enough facts. I did not want to accuse. I told myself I would watch and listen. There was also Kara, Trent's mother. She joined their life like a shadow. I did not meet her in person often, but she lived in every group message. She wrote messages that looked polite on the surface. She used a lot of smile faces and sweet words. But the meaning underneath was clear. She wanted Lena's marriage to look perfect. She wanted Trent to be seen as a strong husband. She wanted any outside concern to sound like jealousy or control. When I asked in the group chat if Lena was feeling better after a clinic visit she mentioned, Kara replied that Lena was lucky to have such a fun husband who knew how to keep her spirits up. She said some fathers struggle to let go. She said it was healthy for older parents to step back. I read that line twice. Older parents. It was not cruel language, but it was a push. It was a way of placing me in a box. I was not a person with a child in front of me. I was an older parent who needed to be managed. I responded calmly. I said I respected their home and their marriage. I said I just wanted Lena to be well. Kara replied with a heart emoji and nothing else. I also started noticing how Trent spoke about money. He did not speak about it like it was a tool. He spoke about it like it was proof of status. He once told me he wanted Lena to have a life she deserved. He said he refused to let her live like she was limited. He said it was my job, as her father, to support that. My job. I remember sitting in my living room after that call ended and staring at my bookshelf. I thought about how many years I worked, how many weekends I skipped trips so I could build stability, how many times I said no to myself so I could say yes to Lena. I did not regret those choices. I only regretted how easy it was for other people to claim ownership over them. Back in the ICU waiting room, that old feeling returned. Being placed in a role, being managed, being used for what I could provide, not who I was. A staff member walked by and asked if I needed water. I thanked them. I drank slowly. My stomach felt tight, but I knew I had to keep my body steady too. Marisol returned later and said the team would do another update soon. She said a social worker would speak with me about contacts and support. She said it was important to have consistent communication. I told her I understood. I told her I was here for Lena. I told her I would stay close and answer every call. Then I checked my phone again and saw a new message. Not from Trent, but from Kara. She wrote that she heard I flew in and asked why I was making things bigger. She wrote that Lena would not want drama and that Trent was handling it. I read it once. I did not reply. I did not want to waste energy arguing in a chat. I did not want to create a written fight that could distract from Lena. I took a screenshot and saved it in my notes without comment. A few minutes later, I got another message from a cousin who lived near the coast. They sent a second photo. It showed Trent again, still on that ship, in a bright setting with people around him. The timestamp was recent. I stared at the image, then I looked around the waiting room. I watched the man pacing. I watched the older woman counting tiles. I thought about how nobody in this room had time for games. I opened my notes again and typed one new line. Ship photo received. Timestamp matches tonight. Then I put my phone down, folded my hands, and made a quiet decision. I would stop trusting words. I would start trusting records. I would do everything the right way through the systems that do not care who is loud. The social worker came to see me not long after I saved the second photo. His name was Ben. He spoke in a steady, careful way, like he did not want to push me into panic. He asked me what my relationship was with Lena and how often we talked. He asked if I knew who her primary doctor was. He asked if there were other close relatives who should be contacted. I told him Lena was my only child. I told him I lived out of state and had relied on her husband to keep me updated. Ben nodded, then said the hospital had rules about who could make decisions and who could receive full updates. He said the husband was listed as the main contact. He also said the unit had tried him several times without success. He said they kept notes of those attempts because it mattered for patient care. He said if the main contact stayed unreachable, the hospital had a process to find a reliable path forward. I asked what unreachable meant in their world. Ben said it meant more than one missed call. He said it meant repeated attempts, different times, and no response. He said it meant the team could not count on that person to answer when needed. I told him I had also been calling and texting without any reply. Ben asked if I could show him the call times on my phone screen. I did, and he looked at the list and nodded once. He said I did the right thing by coming in person. He said he could not promise how the process would go, but he could promise it would follow policy. He asked if I had any written permission from Lena to receive updates. I told him I did not. He said that was common. He said most families do not think about paperwork until a crisis forces it. The word paperwork landed hard, but I did not react. I just asked what I should do next. Ben said for now, I should stay available, keep my phone on, and be ready for the medical team's update meeting. He said he would document that I was present and engaged. He said if the spouse stayed unreachable, the team might need me to help connect to other supports. When Ben left, I sat alone for a few minutes and looked at my notes again. I kept seeing the contrast. A hospital process needs steady answers. A family needs steady presence. And Trent was not steady. He was absent in the one moment where being present was the minimum. I decided to stop guessing and start confirming. I needed to know where Trent really was and how long he planned to stay there. The photos were enough to raise concern, but I wanted a clean timeline. Not for revenge, not for drama, for clarity. I walked out of the hospital and stood near the entrance where I could breathe. I called the cousin who sent the photos. I asked where they got them. They said a friend of theirs recognized Trent and took the shots near the harbor. They said Trent had been posting to his own page too, but it was locked down to a smaller circle. They said they did not want to get involved, but they felt I should know. I thanked them. I ended the call. I opened the photo again and studied small details. The lights, the rail, the background signs. Then I did something I normally do at work when facts are unclear. I looked for fixed points. I searched for the cruise terminal area and scanned public images until I recognized the layout. It matched. I found a schedule board that listed ship names and dates. I did not need to speak to anyone yet. I just needed to know if my eyes were lying. When I got back inside, Marisol met me in the hallway and asked if I wanted a short update. She said Lena was stable for the moment, but still in intensive care. She said the team was watching several things closely. She said the next hours mattered. She said they needed family contact to stay reachable. I told her I was reachable. I told her I was not leaving the area. I asked if Trent had contacted the unit. Marisol's face stayed professional, but her eyes answered before her mouth did. She said no, there had been no contact from him. I felt a tight heat under my ribs, but I kept my voice level. I asked what time they started calling him. She gave me a general window and said the attempts were recorded in the chart. She did not show me anything. She did not have to. Just hearing that it was recorded told me this was not a private family argument anymore. It was a documented gap. Back in the waiting room, I finally got a message from Trent. It was a short text. He said I was overreacting. He said Lena was resting, and the hospital always made things sound intense. He said I needed to calm down and stop calling everyone. He did not ask how Lena was. He did not ask what the doctor said. He did not ask where I was. He wrote like this was a minor inconvenience to his week. I read it twice. Then I replied with one sentence. I said I was at the hospital and the unit could not reach him. I said he needed to call them now. I did not argue about tone. I did not accuse him of anything. I asked for the one thing that mattered. He did not respond. A new message appeared from Kara a few minutes later. She said Trent told her I was making a scene. She said I should remember that marriage comes first. She said I should not try to take control because it would stress Lena. She said Trent would call when he had a chance. That line, when he had a chance, was the moment something in my mind clicked into place. Intensive care does not wait for chances. Hospitals do not run on convenient timing. If Trent could not make space for a call now, then he was not acting like a partner in care. He was acting like a person who expected the world to bend around his plans. I did not reply to Kara either. I saved the message. I turned my phone face down on my lap and stared at the far wall. I could feel the clarity growing, not like anger, but like a clean decision. I left the hospital again later that afternoon for one reason. I needed to confirm the ship's schedule with my own eyes and remove any doubt. I took a rideshare to an overlook near the harbor. The driver talked about beaches and traffic. I answered with polite sounds. My mind was elsewhere. At the overlook, I saw the terminal area in the distance. I saw the shape of a large ship near the docks. I did not need to get close. I did not want confrontation. I just wanted confirmation. I walked along the rail and looked at the signs and posted notices. The ship name matched what I had found online. The date matched. The timing matched. I stood there in the warm air and felt a strange calm settle over me. I had been trying to give Trent the benefit of the doubt. I had been telling myself there must be some reason he was unreachable. Maybe his phone was lost. Maybe he was in a meeting. Maybe he was dealing with something of his own. But the ship was real. The schedule was real. The photos were real. And the hospital's call attempts were real. I went to a small cafe nearby, ordered water and a simple sandwich, and opened my notebook again. I wrote the harbor time, the ship name, and what I observed. I wrote it like a work memo. Short, clear, no emotions. I did not need emotions in my record. I needed facts. Then I made the first call that mattered. I called Ms. Park, my longtime attorney. She has helped me with ordinary things over the years. Nothing dramatic. Estate planning, account structure, basic protections. I told her I was in Los Angeles. I told her Lena was in intensive care. I told her the spouse was unreachable, and there were signs he was traveling for fun. Ms. Park did not raise her voice. She did not gasp. She asked practical questions. She asked what the hospital told me about their process. She asked if I had any written authority. She asked if I had proof of the spouse being unavailable. I said I had messages and photos and my call log, and the hospital also had their own contact notes. She told me to keep everything organized. She told me to avoid arguing in writing. She told me to communicate in short, direct lines and focus on care. She said if the hospital needed a reliable contact, there were lawful ways to support that. She said we could discuss options when I had a quiet moment. She reminded me that any financial support I had set up could also be adjusted within its rules, but only if done carefully. I thanked her. I ended the call. I did not feel relief exactly, but I felt steadier. I was no longer alone with the weight of this. I made the second call. I called Ruth, the relationship manager at my bank. She has known me for years. She knows I do not call unless it matters. I told her I was dealing with a family emergency and I needed to understand how certain accounts were set up. I told her I needed alerts, timestamps, and the ability to pause spending access if the rules allowed it. Ruth asked if I was safe and if I had time to speak privately. I said yes. She said she could review what was already in place, but any changes would follow procedure. She said she could also help me set up better notifications so I would not be surprised again. She spoke like someone who respects process, not drama. I told her that was exactly what I needed. When I returned to the hospital, I did not feel like a man walking into a storm anymore. I felt like a man walking into a system. I checked in at the desk. I sat in the same waiting chair. I opened my phone notes and reviewed the timeline. Trent still did not call the unit. He did not call me. He did not send a message asking what Lena needed. The silence was its own answer. That evening, Ben told me the medical team would meet with me the next morning for a fuller update. He said they had also left messages for the spouse again. He said if there was no response, they would continue with their policy steps. I thanked him. I told him I would be there. I told him I would answer any call. Then I went back to my hotel, sat at the small desk, and labeled a folder on my laptop with Lena's name. Inside it, I placed the screenshots, the photos, and my call logs. I did not feel proud doing it. I felt sad that I had to, but I also felt certain. Whatever happened next, it would not happen in confusion. It would happen with clear facts and clean steps. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm. The room was dark, and the city outside was quiet. I sat on the edge of the bed and listened to my own breathing. My mind wanted to run ahead, but I forced it to stay in the present. I washed my face, put on clean clothes, and checked my phone. There were no missed calls from Trent. There were no messages asking how Lena was doing. There was only a new post notification from a social app sent by the cousin again. It was another picture from the ship. Trent was holding a drink and smiling. I did not open the comments. I did not need to see strangers cheering him on. I saved the image into my folder and closed the app. At the hospital, the same desk worker recognized me and nodded. The waiting area felt colder than yesterday. It always surprises me how a place can feel cold even when the air is warm. It is the way people whisper. It is the way time stretches. Marisol found me within minutes. She said the team would meet with me in the family consult room in an hour. She said Ben would be there too. She said the doctors had updates and needed to confirm who could receive what information. She said they were still trying the husband. I asked calmly if there had been any response overnight. Marisol said no. She said they left messages. She said they used the contact numbers listed. She said it was all recorded in the chart as part of routine communication. I thanked her and sat down again. I opened my notes and reviewed everything I had written: dates, times, call attempts, messages, photos. I also added a line about the meeting time and who would attend. I did this the same way I do at work before a difficult meeting. If I keep a clear timeline, I do not get pulled into noise. Ben arrived a little later and sat across from me. He asked how I slept. I told him I was fine. He said it was normal to feel anger or confusion in situations like this. I told him I was trying to stay focused on what Lena needed. Ben nodded. He said the hospital's main goal was patient care and safe decision-making. He said family issues can make that harder, but the hospital has policies for it. He said if the spouse remained unreachable, the unit would follow the next steps. I asked him what next steps usually looked like, without asking him to break privacy rules. Ben said it depends on the patient's prior choices, the legal relationship, and what the team can confirm. He said the safest thing for me to do was stay present and keep communication calm. He said arguments in the hallway never help anyone. I told him I understood. I told him I was not here to fight. I was here to be useful. While we waited for the doctor, my phone buzzed with a spending alert. It was a charge from the ship. Then another. Then another. A package, a dining upgrade, something listed as guest services. The amounts were not small. I felt my jaw tighten, but I kept my face neutral. Ben noticed my eyes shift to the screen. He did not ask what it was. He just said gently that I should take care of myself too. I thanked him. I put the phone back into my pocket and kept my hands folded. When the doctor came in, the room changed. Everyone became more careful with words. The doctor introduced herself, explained Lena's current condition in simple terms, and said they were watching her closely. She said there were treatment decisions that might come up quickly. She asked again about the husband's availability. She asked if there were other contacts who could reliably answer. I told her I was here. I told her I would answer any time. I also said I had been calling the husband for 2 days with no response. I said I did not know why. I did not add my opinion. I did not insult him. I just stated what I could prove. The doctor looked at Ben, then back at me. She said the hospital would continue to follow policy, and for now they would treat me as an important family contact for communication. She said they still had to respect the legal role of the spouse, but consistent presence mattered. She said they would keep notes of all contact attempts and all responses. I nodded. That sentence, notes of all contact attempts and all responses, was another anchor. In my job, records are truth. They are not emotional. They are not personal. They are what institutions rely on. After the meeting, Marisol let me stand by the hallway window again. Lena looked the same, still, quiet. Her chest rose and fell in a steady rhythm. I watched for a long minute and tried to send calm into the room with my thoughts. I know thoughts do not heal, but I also know a parent's mind will try anything when a child is hurting. Back in the waiting area, Kara finally called me directly. I stepped outside to answer because I did not want to speak loudly near other families. Kara's voice was sharp but controlled. She said I was going around Trent. She said I was trying to take control. She said I was making people look bad. She said I should respect that Trent was the husband. I let her finish. Then I said I respected marriage, but hospitals run on answers, not titles. I said Lena needed someone reachable. I said the unit had tried him many times. I said I had also tried him. I said I was asking for one simple thing, a call to the hospital. Kara said Trent was busy, and I did not understand his life. She said he was under stress too. She said I was judging him without knowing the full story. She said I should stop using money as a way to control people. That last line made me pause. I had not mentioned money, not once. She brought it up because she knew it was the lever that kept their life moving. I said calmly that this was not about control. I said it was about care. I said if Trent wanted respect, he should start with the basic duties that come with his role. I did not raise my voice. I did not add drama. I ended the call with a short goodbye. When I went back inside, I did not feel lighter. I felt clearer. Kara was not calling to ask about Lena. She was calling to protect an image and a lifestyle. The order of priorities was obvious. I returned to my hotel later that day to change clothes and make a few calls in private. First, I called Ruth at the bank. I told her I was receiving spending alerts that did not match the situation. I told her I needed to understand what options existed within the rules of the accounts. I asked her to walk me through how access worked and what actions were allowed in an emergency. Ruth spoke slowly, making sure I understood. She reminded me that everything had to follow procedure. She said certain access could be paused under specific conditions. She said some spending paths could be limited without touching protected funds. She said we could set tighter alerts and require extra confirmation on certain categories. She said I should think carefully about what outcome I wanted. I told her my outcome was simple. I wanted Lena's care protected. I wanted noise removed. I wanted things to be handled the right way, without a fight in public. Ruth said she understood. She said she could prepare the steps for me, but I would need to confirm them properly. She suggested a brief in-person meeting at a nearby branch, because it would be faster and cleaner than back-and-forth calls. I agreed. I set the meeting for later that afternoon. Before I left the hotel, I opened my laptop and tightened my organization. I made subfolders by category, calls, messages, photos, notes from staff conversations, spending alerts. I also wrote a short summary at the top of a document, like an executive memo, just facts, no emotion. I knew that if this turned into any formal process, a clean summary would matter. At the bank, Ruth met me in a small room with a table and a glass wall. She asked me to confirm my identity and a few security details. Then she reviewed the structure of the support I had been providing. She did not speak in dramatic terms. She spoke in policy language. It was almost comforting. She showed me how alerts worked, how timestamps were logged, and how certain access was granted. She explained what I could adjust quickly and what would require extra steps. She also reminded me to document my reasons, not as a story, but as a statement of purpose. I told her my purpose again: Lena's care, stability, clear communication, no surprises. Ruth nodded. She said she would note the request in the system and prepare what she could. I did not walk out with papers in my hands. I did not wave anything around. I simply knew now that the systems were real and the steps were available. That knowledge changed the air around me. Back at the hospital, I sat in the waiting room with a different kind of patience. Not helpless patience, structured patience. I checked my phone less often. I trusted that my alerts would come if something important changed. Trent still did not call, not the unit, not me, not Lena's father sitting 10 minutes away from her room. Late in the evening, Ben told me something that felt like a turning point. He said the unit had scheduled another formal review for the next day. He said the hospital had a responsibility to ensure reliable communication for ongoing decisions. He said the spouse had been contacted again and again. He said the pattern was becoming clear. I thanked him. I asked what time the review would be. He told me. I wrote it down. When I returned to my hotel that night, I did not feel tired in the normal way. I felt like my mind was holding a heavy box and refusing to put it down. I sat at the desk, opened my notes, and read the timeline from start to finish. Then I did one more small thing. I drafted a short message to Trent. I did not send it yet. I just wrote it. It said I was here. It said Lena needed him to call the hospital immediately. It said if he continued to stay unreachable, the hospital would follow policy steps, and I would do the same on my side. I stared at the message for a long time. The words were calm. The meaning was firm. I saved it as a draft and closed my phone. I went to bed knowing one simple truth. The next day would not be about feelings. It would be about who showed up, who answered, and who the systems recognized as reliable. I woke up on the third morning in Los Angeles with my phone already in my hand. I had fallen asleep at the hotel desk again, not in the bed. The laptop was still open, and my notes were still on the screen. I sat up slowly and checked the time. There was still nothing from Trent. No call, no message, no simple line asking what the doctors said. The silence was no longer confusing. It was a choice. I stood at the window and looked down at the street. People were going to work. Cars moved in lines. A delivery truck backed into an alley. The world kept moving like normal, even when your own life feels paused. I took a shower, put on a clean shirt, and ate a plain breakfast bar from my bag. I did not feel hungry, but I knew I needed steady energy. Then I walked outside for a few minutes just to breathe. The air was cool for LA, and the sky was clear. I kept my hands in my pockets and let my mind settle. I told myself one thing over and over. Handle it properly. Not with noise, not with arguments. Properly. At the hospital, the staff at the desk nodded when I arrived. I could tell they saw a lot of people come once, then disappear. I had been there every day. I had answered every question. I had stayed calm. In places like this, consistency becomes its own proof. Marisol met me near the hallway and said the unit had another formal review scheduled. She said it was about communication, planning, and who was reachable. She said Ben would be there again, and a doctor would join for a short part. She also said they had tried Trent again and left more messages. I asked if he replied at all. Marisol said no. I thanked her and sat in the waiting area. I opened my phone notes and added the new time, the new attempt, and the names of the staff present. I wrote it the same way every time, so my record stayed clean. While I waited, my phone buzzed with more spending alerts. A new charge from the ship, then another. It was like watching a faucet run while the house was on fire. I felt my chest tighten. I did not show it. I just looked at the timestamps, then saved them to my folder. Ben arrived and sat beside me. He asked if I had any support in town. I said I had a cousin nearby, but I was mostly on my own. He said it mattered that I stayed grounded. He said long hospital days can make people react in ways they regret. I told him I understood. I told him I was focused on Lena and on clean steps. When we went into the consult room, the doctor spoke first. She gave a brief update on Lena's condition. She used careful words and clear language. She said there were still risks and unknowns. She said the team needed reliable communication because decisions could come quickly. Then Ben explained the hospital process again, but this time with more structure. He said the spouse is usually the main contact, but the hospital also needs a reachable person. He said they had documented repeated attempts to contact Trent, and there had been no response. He said that pattern mattered. I said I understood. I said I had also tried to reach Trent many times. I said I was present and reachable, and I would stay that way. I kept my voice even. I did not speak about the ship. I did not bring up money. I stayed inside the hospital's frame because that was the system in front of me. After the review, Marisol walked me to the hallway window again. I stood and watched Lena. I looked at her hands, the blanket, the steady rhythm of the room. I tried to picture her laughing at my old jokes, the ones she pretended were not funny. I tried to picture her safe at home. Not here. I left the window and sat down again. My phone buzzed. This time it was a call from Kara. I stepped outside to answer. Kara spoke fast. She said she heard the hospital was having meetings and that I was making Trent look bad. She said I should stop creating paperwork problems. She said I should go back home and let the married couple handle their life. I listened without interrupting. Then I said one simple thing. I said, the hospital is not a social club. I said it needs a reachable contact. I said Lena needs a reachable person. I said nobody can handle intensive care by ignoring calls. Kara said Trent was busy and I was judging him. She said he was on a planned trip and I was twisting it. She said I was using my position as a father to push into their marriage. I did not argue with her story. I just asked a direct question. I asked if she could reach Trent right now. I asked if she could tell him to call the unit in the next 10 minutes. There was a pause. Then Kara said she would try. I thanked her and ended the call. I stood outside for a moment and stared at the hospital sign. I realized something that should have been obvious earlier. Kara was not a solution. She was part of the cover. Back inside, I sent Trent a short message, the one I had drafted. I told him I was at the hospital. I told him the unit needed a call from him now. I told him if he stayed unreachable, the hospital would follow policy steps, and I would follow proper steps on my side as well. I did not add emotion. I did not add blame. I did not threaten. I simply stated what was already happening. He did not reply. By midday, I went back to the hotel for a private hour. I needed to speak to my attorney and to the bank without hospital noise around me. I sat at the desk, opened my folder, and reviewed everything again. I checked that my screenshots were labeled by date. I checked that the photos were saved. I checked that my notes were clear and short. Then I called Ms. Park. She answered in her usual calm voice. I told her the hospital had documented multiple contact attempts to Trent with no response. I told her I had messages from Kara that focused on image, not care. I told her I had spending alerts that showed Trent was still using support funds on the ship while Lena was in intensive care. Ms. Park asked me what I wanted to achieve today. Not long term. Today. I said I wanted two things. First, I wanted the hospital to have a reliable path for communication and decisions within their policies. Second, I wanted to stop funding behavior that was clearly not aligned with Lena's care. Ms. Park said that was reasonable. She reminded me to keep every step clean. She said to avoid face-to-face arguments without witnesses or structure. She said I should let institutions do what they do best. She also said timing mattered, and public places with staff and cameras often keep people on better behavior. I understood her point. I told her I would not do anything dramatic. I told her I would do it properly. Then I called Ruth at the bank and confirmed the next step we discussed. Ruth repeated the procedures in plain language. She said certain access could be paused while protecting the core purpose of the support. She said it would not remove anything from Lena's care. She said it would simply prevent optional spending that had nothing to do with the emergency. She said once I confirmed, the change would be active quickly. I confirmed it. When the call ended, I sat still for a moment. I did not feel joy. I felt a heavy calm. I knew this would trigger a reaction because Trent had grown used to access without accountability, but I also knew I had done it through the rules, with the bank's process, and with a clear purpose. I returned to the hospital for the afternoon hours. Staff gave me small updates. Ben checked in. Marisol asked if I had heard from Trent yet. I said no. I kept my answers short. That evening, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Trent. He finally called. Not the unit. Me. I stepped into a quiet corner outside the waiting area and answered. His voice was sharp from the first second. He demanded to know why his card was not working. He said he was being embarrassed. He said I had no right to interfere. I waited for him to pause. Then I said calmly that Lena was in intensive care. I said the hospital had been trying to reach him for days. I said I had been trying to reach him for days. I said he chose not to respond. I said I was not discussing money until he called the unit and confirmed he was reachable. He said he did not have time for hospital drama. He said he would call later. He said I was acting like I owned Lena. I said I did not own anyone. I said I was her father. I said I was in Los Angeles at her bedside while he was on a ship. I said if he wanted to be treated as the main contact, he should act like one. Trent raised his voice. He told me I was trying to punish him. He said I was jealous. He said I was old-fashioned and controlling. He said I needed to stay out of his marriage. I did not match his volume. I said one final line. I said he could speak to me through proper channels if he wanted to argue, but tonight the only acceptable action was calling the unit. Then I ended the call. My hands were steady when I put the phone away. My heart was beating faster, but my mind was clear. A few minutes later, Marisol approached me and said the unit had received a missed call from an unknown number, then no follow-up. She said they left a message asking for a call back. She looked at me like she already knew who it was. I nodded and said nothing. I left the hospital late that night and walked to my car under the parking lights. The city felt loud, even when it was quiet. I got back to the hotel and sat at the desk again. I checked one thing before I slept. The cruise schedule. The ship was returning soon. Trent would have to pass through the terminal to get back to land life. He would have to deal with payment issues, staff, and public counters. He could not hide behind silence there the way he could hide behind a phone. I sent one last short message to Ms. Park. I told her Trent finally called me, but still had not called the unit. I told her the ship was returning soon. I told her I planned to be in a public, structured place when this came to a head. Then I shut the laptop, placed my phone face down, and lay back on the bed. I did not feel like I was preparing for a fight. I felt like I was preparing for a clean consequence. The next day, I would stop waiting for Trent to choose responsibility on his own. I would place him in front of the systems he had been ignoring, and I would let those systems speak. I arrived at the cruise terminal early, before the main crowd. The morning air smelled like salt and fuel. I stood near a public entrance where there were signs, cameras, and staff desks. I did not come to argue. I came to end the confusion in a place built for rules. Ms. Park met me in a small business nook inside the terminal. It was not a courtroom. It was not dramatic. It was just a quiet area with a table, a printer, and a few office chairs. That was enough. She asked if I was ready to keep it clean. I said yes. She reminded me to let staff handle staff issues, and to let the hospital handle hospital issues. She said my job was to speak only facts. I had a thin folder in my hand. It was the first time I carried it out in the open. Inside were the receipts I had been collecting. Not to punish, to prove. A guest services lead named Omar checked in with us. Ms. Park told him we were here for a payment issue connected to an account holder and an authorized user. Omar said he could not discuss anyone's private details without confirmation. Ms. Park said we understood, and then she showed her credentials and my identification. Omar nodded and said he would follow procedure. A security supervisor stood nearby, not aggressive, just present. That mattered. People behave differently when they know they are being seen. We waited for the ship to complete its return flow. People began to come through in groups. Many were smiling, talking about meals and views. I watched faces pass like a slow stream. My mind stayed locked on one truth. My child was still in intensive care, and this place was where the other half of the story would be forced into daylight. Then I saw Trent. He walked off the ship with energy, like he had slept well. He wore casual clothes and carried a small bag. He looked around, spotted me, and his face changed fast. He came toward me with quick steps and a tight smile that was not friendly. He said I embarrassed him. He said his card stopped working and people looked at him. He said I had no right to touch anything connected to his life. He said I needed to fix it now. I did not raise my voice. I told him Lena was still in intensive care. I told him the unit called him many times and got no answer. I told him I called him many times and got no answer. I told him he had time for a ship, but not time for a hospital call. Trent said the hospital was exaggerating. He said he planned the trip before and could not cancel. He said I was using money to control him. He said I was trying to take his place. Ms. Park stepped forward slightly and said we were not here for a debate. She said this was a procedure matter and it would be handled through written terms and documented records. She said if Trent wanted to disagree, he could do it through the same channels. Trent laughed in a short, sharp way and said he did not care about paperwork. He said he was the husband and that was the end of it. I looked at him and said, being a husband is not a title for photos. I said it is a duty when the phone rings from intensive care. He started speaking louder. People nearby turned their heads. I noticed 2 phones lifted in the air, not pointed directly, but close enough. I did not acknowledge them. Omar approached with a tablet and spoke in a neutral voice. He said there was an active payment issue on the account used for onboard purchases. He said the system required an updated payment method or the current charges could not be settled. He said it was not personal. He said it was policy. Trent told Omar to make an exception. He said it was a mistake. He said I was being difficult. Omar said he could not make exceptions. He said the system did not allow it. He said the authorized user access had been paused. Trent turned back to me and demanded I turn it back on. He said I could do it with 1 call. He said I was enjoying this. I told him I did not enjoy anything about this. I told him the pause was not a game. I told him it was a protective step, done through the bank's procedure, tied to a simple condition, reachable contact during a medical emergency. I told him he failed that condition. His face tightened. He said I was lying. He said I had no proof. That was the moment I opened the folder. I did not wave it. I did not slam it on a table. I set it down calmly in front of Ms. Park and Omar, and I slid one page forward. The first page was the bank's written confirmation. It showed the time the change took effect and the category limits placed on the spending access. It stated, in plain language, that this was an authorized adjustment by the account owner, consistent with the account's access terms. Trent leaned in, then pulled back like the paper burned him. He said the bank had no right. He said I had no right. Ms. Park said the bank followed the account owner's instructions and the written terms. She said Trent had access by permission, not by entitlement. Trent's voice rose again. He said he would report me. He said he would tell everyone what kind of father I was. He said I was ruining his marriage. I slid the next set of pages forward, but I did not hand them to Trent. I handed them to Ms. Park, and she handed them to Omar and the security supervisor to view if needed. These pages were not gossip. They were a clean timeline, my call log with timestamps, my messages asking him to call the unit, Kara's messages focusing on image and telling me to stay in my lane, the 2 ship photos with timestamps, then a short typed note summarizing the hospital's contact attempts, with the names of the staff who told me it was documented in the chart. I did not show the hospital chart itself. I did not need to. The point was not private medical details. The point was contact and responsibility. Omar looked uncomfortable, not because of conflict, but because the situation was now clear. He said he understood. He said he would note the facts and proceed with policy. The security supervisor asked Trent to lower his voice and step aside from the walkway. Trent refused. He said he was being targeted. He said I planned this. I told him calmly that I planned only one thing. I planned to make sure Lena had reliable support and that money meant for stability did not fund the opposite. Ms. Park then placed the final item on the table, face down at first. She said this was the part that mattered for the hospital, not for the ship. She said it was an emergency contact and decision support filing, prepared in advance for situations where the listed contact is unreachable. She said it would be sent through official channels to the hospital team, not argued about in a terminal. She flipped it face up. Trent froze when he saw his name in the context of unreachable contact. His mouth opened, then closed. He tried to speak, but only louder words came out. He said I was stealing his role. He said nobody could do that. Ms. Park said nobody steals anything. She said institutions follow reliability. She said the hospital's priority is the patient, and the record of who answers calls matters. She said Trent could correct the situation at any time by acting like a reachable, responsible contact. She said until then, the hospital would not wait. Omar said he needed Trent to step to the counter to resolve payment, or security would escort him out of the terminal flow. Trent looked around and seemed to realize he was not in a private argument anymore. He was in a public space with staff, cameras, and witnesses. Trent tried one last move. He said Lena would be upset with me. He said I would regret this. He said I was going to end up alone. I kept my voice low and steady. I said Lena needed care, not a show. I said I was done funding a show. The security supervisor asked Trent again to step aside. This time Trent complied, but his shoulders were tight and his face was red. Omar walked with him toward the counter. Trent kept talking, but the words blurred into the noise of the terminal. Ms. Park gathered the folder and said we were done here. She said the hospital would receive the filing through the correct process within the hour. She said I should go back to Lena. As we walked out, my phone buzzed with a new alert. It was a bank notification confirming the onboard spending access remained paused. A second alert came in right after, a missed call from the cruise counter, likely Trent trying to force the bank to override it. I did not call back. I did not need to. I looked back once and saw Trent standing at the counter with Omar, his bag on the floor, his head turning side to side like he was searching for a way out that did not exist. The security supervisor stood close, calm and firm. Then I turned toward the exit, already dialing the intensive care unit's number, and I did not look back again.